Now, at the age of 14, she was named on the Forbes list of 100 most influential African women. She's met presidents, prime ministers, captains of some of the biggest companies in the world, and numerous Hollywood and music stars, music industry A-list stars. As if all that isn't enough, Zuriel Oduwole, the American-Nigerian teenager, is also a filmmaker, a documentary producer, an education advocate, and an upcoming writer, as well as a role model for countless young women across Africa and the world. Just recently, the prestigious LA magazine listed her among the top 15 emerging black women producers and filmmakers in Hollywood. Zuriel, of course, made her first film at the age of 9 about the revolution in Ghana, and her fourth film at the age of 12 was shown in movie theaters across Africa, the UK and Japan. It made her the youngest producer in the world to show their film in a commercial theater. So, who is this ordinary but rather precocious teenager who's doing such extraordinary things? Well, earlier I was joined in the studio by Zuriel Oduwole herself, and I began by asking her to tell me how, at the age of 9, she came to be an impressive filmmaker and an international public figure.
Really, everything started with filmmaking. When I was 9, I made my first documentary. It was part of a school competition, and so they asked me and some other students to come together and create your own documentary on a particular topic. So for the year I did this on, the topic was revolutions that happened in history. But with me, I always want to think outside the box and do things that are different. Now see, most of my peers were doing things on the US or in Europe or in Asia, so I thought, hey, let me do something in Africa. So I did a lot of research, and I found out that the Ghana Revolution was one of the most successful held on the continent. So I chose to focus my documentary on the Ghana Revolution.
Right.
And from there, I went to Ghana to shoot some scenes and film footage for my documentary. And while I was there, that was the first time I actually saw with my own eyes girls on the street selling things instead of being in school and getting an education. So seeing that made me want to do something to help get them back into school. And that's how I started my education project, my Dream Up, Speak Up, Stand Up project when I was 10 years old. That's how everything started.
And this, just tell us a bit about that Ghana Revolution and what impact your film then had that sort of helped you to sort of get started on the road to filmmaking.
Well, when I made the documentary, I took it back home to show my peers and also the judges of the competition. And what I most realized was that the way that the media sometimes portrays the African continent, they portray it a lot in a negative light. So sometimes when I take my documentaries back home, my peers would be surprised, because they don't know the African continent has hotels or airports and things like that. So I realized that through documentary and through filmmaking, because of the power of media, that's a great way to get your message across. And so I use filmmaking to help rebrand the African continent by telling more positive stories, but also to sometimes highlight issues such as girls' education.
And of course, subsequent to that, you clearly became incrementally influential. I mean, Forbes listed you at the age of 14 as one of the most influential African women. And I mean, of all generations, really. How did that touch you, affect you?
Well, obviously, it's an honor whenever someone even considers me to be in a list such as that. I mean, because there are many great women around the world doing incredible things to influence others. But most times I don't tend to focus on that. I mean, I don't do what I'm doing to get recognized or get put on lists such as those. I do what I'm doing because I have a passion to help tell positive stories, but also to try and get more girls into schools.
And what impact has that passion had so far? In a sort of quantifiable sense, how much difference have you made in trying to get girls into schools?
Well, if I break it down to two things I do, with my girls' education project specifically, my Dream Up, Speak Up, Stand Up program, I mean, now I've done that in 14 countries, in places like Tanzania. I've done it here in Nigeria, Kenya, Malawi, Mauritius, all over. With this girls' education project, what happened was, one time I went to Malawi. I was there to speak at an orphanage to address the students there, especially the girls, about why it's important to have dreams, believe in your dreams, and do your best to accomplish your dreams. So I went there to go and speak to them, and you would not have thought that I made a difference, because throughout the entire thing, they were all quiet. So I left Malawi, went back home, and a couple weeks later, the head teacher at that orphanage contacted me, and she told me the story of how one of the girls from that orphanage, basically the teacher took all the kids out to a concert because of how well they're doing in school. And so this girl, while at the concert, she told her head teacher that she wanted to go and interview the top Malawian singer. And the teacher was shocked because, you know, they're usually very quiet. And when she asked her why she wanted to do it, she said because when this girl came and spoke to us about having dreams and talked to us about how she interviews world leaders, she thought that the least she could do was go and interview that head performer. And that's just one story. I mean, recently I started filmmaking classes because I'm a filmmaker, and basically I try and teach youths, unemployed youths, and those who are still in school, how to make films so they can tell their own stories and tell positive African stories as well. So I took this filmmaking class. I started in Namibia, 2016. I've done it now in Mexico, in Mauritius, in Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kenya. But what happened was my very first film class in Namibia, I went there, taught them some editing skills, how to shoot with phones, and 9 months after that film class, one of the girls who attended actually came back and told me that she created her own documentary. She was shopping it around to news networks, and she was looking to create a follow-on of that documentary as well. So those are just some success stories I've heard so far based on these projects that I've done.
Well, that's brilliant. We'll talk a little bit more about your filmmaking career in a moment, but you've obviously met lots of very important people. You've met presidents, you've met prime ministers, you've met captains of industry, you've met A-listers and Hollywood, I mean music, you know, performers and all that sort of thing. Is it difficult being this young and trying to get world leaders and captains of industry to take you seriously?
Well, I would say when I first started, I was 9 years old. And maybe because I was 9, I haven't really spoken to any world leaders yet. Maybe I wasn't taken as seriously, but whenever I go there, I always go with a mission and a goal, which is to talk about girls' education. And while I'm talking to these world leaders, you know, the conversation gets serious. We start talking about policies and ways to get girls in their country into school. And I think now, because I've been doing it for such a long time, I mean, I've spoken to over 28 world leaders, originally starting on the African continent, like in Nigeria, Mauritius, South Sudan, Liberia, but I've also met leaders from Europe, like Croatia and Malta, and also in the Americas. So I think now, because I've met so many, I think that I'm taking it a lot more seriously now.
And tell us what you've been doing in Nigeria since you arrived here. You've been here a few days.
Yeah. So this time, I'm here in Nigeria because you know that I'm passionate about girls' education. So what I want to do is I want to find out how mothers, because they play an important role in girls' lives, how they can help their daughters with their education and help them with their dreams. So I'm here in Nigeria because I'm doing a study to find out how mothers can help their girls with their schooling. So what I'm doing is I'm visiting schools across the African continent in 4 countries, and I'm basically trying to get to understand the girls I'm speaking to, understand their challenges, but more importantly, understand what others can do to help them, you know, achieve their goals. So I was here, and I did it in Lagos. I'm also here in Abuja for the exact same reason. I'm going to also do it in South Africa, in Kenya, and also Ethiopia.
And of course, you've just been in Ghana, where you met the Ghanaian president.
Yeah.
And just recently, I think LA Magazine listed you amongst the top 15 emerging black women producers and filmmakers in Hollywood. What's your reaction to that?
Shocked, because
I mean, I saw you perched in the sort of there's a portrait, a photograph. I think you were in the top left-hand corner or something like that.
So something like that, probably. Honestly, I was shocked because I didn't think that, you know, I'm recognized that much of what I do, because I mostly focused, again, on my education projects and my documentary filmmaking. So to see something like that, it's shocking because I don't think that.
But why do you think they listed you there? What sort of influence do you think you have as a filmmaker?
I guess it'd have to be the stories that I'm telling. I mean, because I do mostly focus on telling the stories of others and telling positive stories.
Human stories.
Yeah, that and also telling stories on positive things here on the African continent.
So, I mean, here you are just turning 16? You're just about to turn 16 or just
15,
turned 16?
I'm turned 16, yeah, pretty
Right.
soon.
I mean, but already you're a filmmaker, you're a documentary producer, you're an education advocate, and you're a writer as well. You wrote a book. What's the book about?
Well, I haven't yet written a book.
Okay,
That's
but
in the works, yeah.
it's in the works. Right, okay.
I think the book you're talking about was actually done by, it wasn't done by me, it was done by an American-Canadian company.
Okay, about you.
About me, yeah. It
Right,
came out a little
okay.
while ago for the next school year, yeah.
So given all that, what's next in the life and times of Zuriel Oduwole?
It's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. Definitely I'm going to continue my filmmaking. I'm also going to continue fighting for the rights for girls' education. But you know, recently I just graduated high school. So probably next we'll be looking at colleges and what I'm going to study then, yeah.
And just very briefly, because we're out of time, where do you find the time to actually do things like go to school and just hang out with your friends?
Well, I've been doing it since I was 9. I'm 15 now, so 6 years. I've learned to balance it. I set aside time for my extracurricular activities like my filmmaking, my traveling overseas, and then because I'm homeschooled, so that's I'm able to balance my schooling because I can do my schoolwork as long as I have a computer and I have internet, which I can get anywhere when I'm traveling. With regards to, as you say, having fun or just hanging out with my friends, I've learned to balance it. I mean, a lot of times on the weekends, I go with my friends, we go to the beach, we go to the movies, we just hang out in general. So I find time to still do things with my friends, my family as well.
Well, we commend you tremendously for the work you're
much.
doing and for what you've achieved at this very young age. Zuriel, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The always fascinating 16-year-old filmmaker and education advocate Zuriel Oduwole talking to me earlier.